Republican National Convention in 2012 in pursuit of finding donors. This was August after I graduated high school. And I just had this idea to try to bring the conservative agenda to young people, to the next generation. I met him in a stairwell at the Republican National Convention. I gave him a stairwell pitch. And to your point, which is exactly right, I kind of presented 4 or 5 things really quickly.
Yeah.
No one trained it. I just kind of instinctively, I said, well, here's 5 ideas that I have. He laughed, he chuckled, gave me his business card. He said, be in touch, send me $10,000 the next week. That was like
How did you know
$10
that there
million.
was such a thing as finding donors? And what do you think it was that set you up to have the gall to assume you could do, first of all, to know that that was a thing, and then to have the gall to pursue it?
The second one, I don't know. I don't know where I got the gall to pursue it. I will say Bill Montgomery, being a mentor of mine, was very encouraging towards me.
Okay. So you had someone encouraging you.
Yes.
And you said he saw something in you.
Yes, and he was
an entrepreneur.
Yes, and he never asked for anything from me, which was very unique. It wasn't like he was trying to have some agenda. He was 72 years old.
So you had a mentor,
yes,
which you desperately need as a young person, definitely. And someone who believes that you can do it.
And you think about it, you're 18 years old. You don't know how to cash checks. You don't know.
Yeah.
You barely know how to put on a tie. Literally, I didn't know how to tie a tie for the first 2 years. At Turning Point. Again, my parents are phenomenal, and they deserve a lot of credit. But this was kind of a beyond the upbringing, where an external mentor comes in and kind of points you and says, hey, I think you're really good at this, found a skill, identified a skill, and kind of molded me in that direction.
You know that young male elephants go mad if there's no old male elephant to butt heads with them. That's very well documented.
It's very apropos for Republicans.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
So,
yeah.
But it was, I'm a quick learner. I'm a quick study. And so I started to do research. I said, well, are there things such as external nonprofit political organizations? Oh, there's a 501c3 or there's a 501c4 and you can raise money. And so the first couple months was me actually learning, what am I building? Am I building?
So you were training as an administrator and a manager then too?
I was everything for the first.
Yeah, of course.
I was CEO, I was janitor, I was everything.
Yeah.
And so I had to make a decision. Of course, I asked for advice. Am I going to start a for-profit company? Am I doing we decided on nonprofit, largely because we believed that there was an untapped pool of philanthropic dollars that wanted to see these campuses challenged and disrupted. And
how do you figure that out?
Having a lot of conversations with a lot of wealthy people. And I realized that So if you talk to a donor type, they'll have 2 different ways of deploying capital in their after years. The first of which is investment, which comes with strict return on investment requirements. And they look at that as, hey, I need to make sure that this money is stewarded and shepherded, and eventually I get an ROI.
Right.
The second bucket is philanthropy, where they actually aren't looking for a material or a monetary ROI. They're looking for a cultural or a macro ROI. And those sometimes are in donor-advised funds or they're in 501c3 type categories. And we saw a lot of amazing patriotic donors that stepped up and said, hey, I have done very well in my business, and this is what I found. And I connected the dots. They said, I have this money sitting around that I pledged to Yale.
Right.
$1 million a year, and I'd hate not to give it to them. Is there some other better idea? What we found was so many conservative donors that had a lot of money, but not a lot of great ideas of where to deploy that 501. You think about it, the predominant amount of 501c3s in the educational space are left wing.
Yeah, all of them.
Right, exactly. So here I am. I'm kind of this new disruptive force. And they say, okay, and I'm not going to give him the money I give to Yale, but I'll give him $50,000 a year, kind of see how he does.
Right.
And so we started to earn the trust of a lot of donors and earn the trust of a lot of philanthropists.
Okay. So now you're going out on campuses. Do you remember the first time you did this?
Oh yeah, University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Tell me about that.
I drove up there. We had a singular student.
And who's we?
Well, we being like, actually Bill Montgomery came with me to that one, but he kind of just was in the shadows. I literally had a card table that I brought from my parents' house and set it up right there on the campus, University of Wisconsin-Madison. I think I still have a picture of this. And I had some sign that said, big government sucks, a little provocative.
Yeah.
And I sat there at a chair, and I think a student would come up maybe once every 15 minutes. And I was there trying to solicit to try to get a chapter started there at University of Wisconsin-Madison.
And that was a Turning Point chapter.
That's right, correct.
So this was partly a recruitment drive.
It was a recruitment drive, and to see if there was any interest, and also to try to. And to be perfectly honest, I love the debate. I love the exploration of ideas. I think dialogue is a gift given to us by God. I really, in the pursuit of truth, and being able to debate some of these college kids was really life-giving. It was exhilarating to me as a 19-year-old.
Well, that is a university education. That's what a Socratic education.
Right? It's what
sure. Well, and there is historical precedent for what you're doing. I mean, I remember, for example, outside the the building I worked in at the University of Toronto, there was quite frequently a card table set up, and it was the bloody communists that were at the back of that.
And now we go deeper into this topic, Dr. Peterson, about how liberals have become really institutional puppets. We talk and we break down to how Republicans used to do stuff and being very buttoned up, and how liberals have become more high trust and conservatives low trust. Dr. Peterson takes a little exception with this, little bit. He pushes back slightly and gently, I think in a very helpful way. And I appreciated that correction. So watch.
That's what was so funny is very rarely is it our side that does this.
Yeah.
And then there's an element here that I think you've gone around the edges on that I want to dive into. I was viewed as unseemly by the conservative establishment because the conservative way of doing things, it's not to go set up a card table.
No, definitely not.
It was to speak properly.
Yeah.
And to go to Stanford and to get the highest possible education. And what I was unknowingly on the cutting edge of was something you mentioned earlier, is that conservatives have now become low trust of institutions and liberals have become high trust of institutions. Whereas liberals are the ones that will defend the FDA and they'll defend the CDC and they'll defend Pfizer and they'll defend the intelligence.
That's defending Pfizer. That's really.
But they will.
Yeah.
Because they're high trust of institutions.
Because there's no one more trustworthy from a leftist perspective than Big Pharma.
But they find themselves defending institutions.
Yeah.
In the 1960s, they were low trust of institutions. Don't send us to war. There is.
Yeah.
Whereas today, actually, and I was on the cutting edge of this, was in 2012, 2013, 14, conservatives were still on the high trust of institutions.
Okay, so let me rephrase that slightly.
Please,
Because
but you understand what I'm trying to communicate.
I do. Well, there's a real conundrum there because a conservative with low trust in institutions is like an oxymoron, right? Well, but
we're trying to conserve something the institutions have destroyed.
Well, okay, that's the thing. So imagine that there's a hierarchy of institution. There's the fringe of the institution that's pretty exploratory. You can move into the center that's more conservative. Then you can move right to the bottom, which is, well, what? Well, I would say it's religious. Fundamentally, like as you move towards the core,
that's right.
You move towards what's more religious. And so the conservative stance isn't anti-institution. It's a stance that notes that, I know what's happened. In the story of Moses, when Moses goes off to get the commandments, so he's the pipeline to God, right? He leaves his brother in charge, Aaron.
They have a rave party.
That's exactly right. They make this golden calf, which is a materialistic object, and they dance naked in the streets and have an orgy. And that's what happens to the political when it's detached from the sacred, when it loses
that's exactly right.
Okay, so it isn't that the conservatives have become skeptical of institutions. It's that the conservatives have noted that the institutions no longer serve the purpose for which they were established.
Chartered.
Right? Chartered, exactly. And they're objecting, and that's happening everywhere. And that's part of this radical secularization.
Yes.
It's not just secularization, because there should be a separation between church and state, let's say. It's not that the institutions have become secular. It's that they've turned 180 degrees from their original orientation and are now rampaging as madly as possible in the other direction. So the universities are no longer the fortress walls against the barbarians. They're actually the voice of the barbarians, right? Hence the pro-Hamas demonstrations on campus.
Or the Black Lives Matter stuff, or the transgender stuff. That's
right.
Very well said.
Exactly. Okay, so but we got to get that terminology exactly right, because it's very dangerous for conservatives to conceptualize themselves as anti-institutional, because then they become indistinguishable from the radicals.
Sure.
So it isn't that. It's a return to the sorts of things we talked about at the beginning, like Wilberforce.
That's right.
Those foundational principles.
Yes.
And you're going to campuses saying, you people have lost the plot.
Exactly.
Right, which they definitely have. Like there's the universities. I cannot see, I've been working in various ways to figure out how to revitalize the universities. And the bricks and mortar universities. Like, how do you revitalize an institution that's dominated by people who are aiming in the wrong direction?
They're irredeemable.
So what does that mean? Okay, so let's continue practically here. So tell me what happens the first time at Wisconsin.
Conversation every 15 minutes. A couple kids were interested, found a chapter leader.
You found a chapter.
Yeah,
okay, so that was success.
So it was a success. We found a couple groups of people and we started the group. And then I did it at Marquette University because I had a friend that went there.
And so you walked away from that. How did you feel when you
Exhilarated.
walked away? You did?
Because then I was able to go back to 2 or 3 people giving us money.
And say...
And they gave us $500. I said, now we have a chapter. We can, and they said, okay, well, let us know how it goes. Proof of concept.
Right.
And so then we did it at Marquette, and we did it at University of Illinois, and we did it at Indiana.
So you went from 0 to 1, which is a huge leap.
It was a huge lift.
It's a huge leap.
Because getting that second chapter was so much easier than ex nihilo.
Of course. 0 to 1 is, the first customer is impossible. And then the second one's hard.
It was one of the most fulfilling days in Turning Point USA history.
Right, okay.
Was being able to get a singular chapter.
Right, of course, because that's the one that's most unlikely.
Exactly.
Your first sale is by far the most unlikely.
Exactly.
Right, okay, so then you went to Marquette.
Then Marquette.
Okay, and what happened there?
Very similar situation, but it was also a friend of somebody in high school, and they were a private school, so it was a little harder to do the typical outreach, but they applied for a permit in like the student center, and same sort of thing.
So you were permitted from the beginning as well?
Well, in UW-Madison, they don't care as much because it was a public school. So you can kind of, any individual can walk on campus and kind of.
Right, okay.
But Marquette, I had a friend that I went to high school with. They said, yeah, I'll apply for something for you.
Okay.
And similar sort of thing. And they said, I sat there for 5 hours, Jordan. I would sit there for 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah.
Because that was time well spent. Because for me, I was trying to build the semblance of something, a real infrastructure, a real organization. And boy, was it difficult.
Yeah.
But it was never disheartening, though, because I had nothing to lose. You have to understand, I'm an 18, 19-year-old kid.
Right.
It's not like I'm mortgaging the house. It's not like I have two kids.
Yeah.
So there's such low downside and unlimited upside.
Right, sure. Well, that's the entrepreneurial niche.
And it was such an adventure because it's a campus I've never been to, talking to a bunch of kids. It's, you're almost having verbal combat, which is very entertaining.
Well, and I imagine too that it must have been heartening to you as well to see that you could hold your own.
Exactly. And so that's a really important point. Here I am as a kid that didn't go to college thinking, do I really have the intellectual capacity to joust with kids that are learning all day long?
Yeah, right.
I realized they're not learning all day long.
Yeah.
You see, I was reading von Mises and Rothbard before I came across you.
Yeah.
Hayek, Milton Friedman, very libertarian economics was my baseline foundational philosophy. A lot of reasons for that. Very, very interesting. Tons of profound insights, some of which don't, I think, actually play out very well in the material world. But so I would encounter kids on campuses who professed to be studying economics, for example, and they didn't know very much.
Right.
And I realized, I said, well, there's a disconnect. They're borrowing money to go learn about things that I actually have a greater mastery of because I was...
Well, you can learn a lot if you read the right...
I can't believe it, but I actually taught Dr. Peterson something about the Bible. And I actually talk about the Hebrew word Hanani, which means here I am, from the call of Samuel to the call of Isaiah to the binding of Isaac to the call of Moses. Here I am, Lord, is a theme we've talked about a lot here on the Charlie Kirk Show, which also I encourage you guys to subscribe to our podcast. And Hanani, a very important word. And Dr. Peterson kind of was like, really, tell me more about that. And it was a great moment to be able to teach your teacher something. And I just have to repeat, Dr. Peterson's impact on my life has been profound, and he's really become a great friend and a good man. Watch.
Oh, and in my idle time, I became obsessed with being proficient and understanding economics. That was kind of my entry point.
Oh, yeah, I see.
And so you have to remember, 2013...
You know that burning bush story?
Oh,
That's Moses' entry point, by the way. So the burning bush
Exodus
moment,
3, I think,
the burning bush moment happens when Moses goes off the beaten path. He's a shepherd, right? So a good man, keeps the wolves and lions at bay, serves the vulnerable.